Okay. So Gregory Braille.
He's here.
Thank you.
Phil Burton.
Here and gobsmacked.
Yes. Tony Carrasco.
Here.
In-Young Cho.
Not yet. Don't
Not
see her
yet.
yet.
Larry Klein.
Here.
Nadia Naik.
Here.
Keith Reckdahl.
Here.
Dave Shen.
Here.
Carrie Templeton.
I see Carrie.
Is there.
Here.
There you
Great.
go.
Thank you. Okay, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. I thank you all for being here because I recognize it has been an insane day and very hard to pull ourselves away from the television sets to do this meeting. So just wanted to acknowledge that. I don't know about you guys, but I was not able to read anything that was put out today because I have been glued to my television set.
Yeah, I will confess the same.
Okay, great. As long as it's not just me. And also, staff just pointed out to me, if we have to have another meeting, there's another meeting scheduled for January 20th, which of course is Inauguration Day. So we may want to consider whether we want to move that just so we can be done with all this craziness. So we could talk about that at the next meeting. I'll talk to staff about potentially pulling you guys for a different day, just so that, because I want to recognize that, there's just a lot happening. Okay, I think, so staff has some updates. Staff, I'll let you give your update and then I can give mine if you want. So Ripon, I'll let you start.
Thank you, Chair, and also Happy New Year to all the XCAP members. Hope everyone has a good year ahead. Just a few things that we are working on the fact sheets as well as the matrix with the requested changes on the right-of-way on Caltrans language, and so we'll clarify that in more detail. We hope to have that update end of this week or early next week, so we'll forward that information to the XCAP. And also,
I'm sorry, Ripon, can you just
we
remind?
talked about what is that again?
Oh, I was just going to say, could you remind everybody, this was about, guys, the language on the matrix that talks about encroachment into the right of way, whether it's permanent or just during construction, those kinds of things. So all that's being updated.
Correct. So it was clarifying also longitudinal encroachment versus transverse or cross the encroachment on different options at Churchill, especially, but others. And then also clarifying, like on Meadow Charleston, the encroachment permanent for if it's permanent for certain cases. So more clarification on the type of encroachment that's on the Caltrans right away.
Awesome.
And in regards to all the other requested, the connecting Palo Alto, all the renderings as well as layouts and plans, I'm compiling all that in the regular format as well as reduced size format, so that way it's easier for us to include that in appendix for the project for the report. And so I'll be compiling that all together, and I have an IT authorization to provide it to XCAP, and so we'll work on that one and have that one sent to either to the XCAP members or the chair and vice chair for that compiled exhibits. In addition, I would like to also add or update on the XCAP that we do have a project which is happening at the intersection of Alma and Churchill. It is about rail grade safety project. The project is separate from XCAP and is more focused and limited in nature. It's more focused on the rail safety at the intersection and the improvements that are necessary to make sure that the intersection and the signal operations is safe. And any improvements, this is funded through a Section 130 Caltrans funds. So therefore it requires approval from Caltrans as well as CPUC and Caltrains to ensure that whatever improvements goes in are approved by all three entities before we can get funded through them. So this is a 100% funded Section 130 project.
Can
We
I
do
ask a
have a
question
community.
about that? Sorry.
Sure. We do have a community meeting that we are planning to conduct to inform the community. We did send notices to the residents around the project area, about 1,000 feet or a quarter of a mile radius to send the notices to all the residents in the vicinity, as well as we have posted in the newspaper, as well as on our city's website for information to the residents and community. The information is available on our city's website on the project page for Zoom community meeting, which is scheduled on January 21st at 6:30 p.m. So anyone like to come in, you're welcome to come in and learn more about the project. City also plans to go to Payback and school separately to inform them about the project and the scope and get their information regarding the project. So yeah.
Greg has a question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, so I looked into Section 130 a little bit as well. As I understand, it's a state pool of funding for grade crossing safety improvements, and the amount of money that they give to various projects appears to be in the single-digit millions of dollars.
Right.
Do you know if we use this now for the safety improvements, which I think are a great idea, can we go back and ask again when we do the actual grade separation projects, or is there some sort of like one and done kind of rule?
No. So I just to be clear, this was something that they meaning the FRA, and Ripon, correct me if you know something different, but they identified this safety project, and not just this one, but other ones that were necessary. Mm-hmm. So this was on their list of projects that they felt was necessary, and that's why this funding was allocated towards this project.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that
usually
there are
this
federal
is
mandates and stuff. So.
Yeah. And usually they have fund the at-grade crossings so as to improve the safety at those locations, not the grade separations.
Because I saw on the list that Mountain View also received funding for Castro and Ringsdorf, and I was curious if that was part of their grade crossing efforts, which are farther along than ours, or whether those are similar safety improvements until they do the actual grade separation.
Interim measures.
Yeah, it's likely that it is similar.
Okay.
In interim, and because just so you know, we talked with them about this when we were, looking at the project, and we said, we just wanted to make sure that it's clear that, we were planning to potentially make changes to this crossing in the future. And They said, hey, if we can gain this safety benefit for, 5 years or anything, it's worthwhile. And I completely agreed with that. So, I think that, we're lucky that they've helped us to identify funding to make some improvements here. And I guess that's kind of the end of the story, but it wasn't something like we were seeking out this funding and like we applied for it. And now we're off the list for ever getting any kind of funding for railroad grade safety. Okay. I think as long as there's
that's our $5 million and we're done. Okay.
Yep. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes my staff report. Thank you.
Ripon, when do you think the improvements that you spoke about will be done? Is it 2 years?
So anticipated timeline is about by 2024.
Okay, thanks.
Design and construction complete.
Okay, so I have an update. So the good news, we have secured an editor to help us with the final part of our report. So what that means from a process perspective is that we are doing the bulk of the editing, meaning the substantive stuff and the actual words and what's in there on our own. And we hope to hand off to the editor a final Word version that editor will then put together and deal with the pagination and the headings and all of that sort of stuff. And with any graphics that we might choose to put in there, and our bulky appendix, which I've been talking to staff with, and then also with Dave Shen in terms of trying to compress graphics. But Ripon actually, as it turns out, had already done a lot of that work. So it does mean that we will turn it into we hope to turn in something to our editor, and we have a limited number of hours that we've been authorized by the city to spend with that. So when we get it back, we will check it for, spacing and whatever, but it means that we will not be tooling with any wording then. So we really have to hand off the most complete version.
And
of what-
Nadia, that
yeah.
means that the editor will not be doing substantive changes to the content.
Right. So she will read through, she's a former Palo Alto resident. She lives in Redwood City, but she grew up here, went to Pali. So she knows our territory. So when we say, town and country, she knows what we're talking about in there. But she's not going to be she might come to us and ask questions if there's something that's unclear. And she'll check for things like, voice, did we use I or we or something in there? And check for tone and that sort of stuff and consistency of voice, but really not making any substantive edits
Okay.
at all. So, we will, as a group, have to continue with the editing work that we've been doing, but thankfully, you will not be at the mercy of my word skills. And when I tell you that is good news, really it is. So I just wanted to put that out there. Yeah, Tony.
Nadia, I was wondering when the last day is to change wording and stuff like that.
So we're going to talk about that later on, but basically we'll review stuff, and probably at our next meeting, everybody's homework will have to be to read everything cover to cover and basically bring forth at the next meeting. If you've got beef with some wording, that's your chance to do it. And, I'm hoping to do that all in one meeting. If we have to do it in two, so be it. But really, I'm sure all of you are as tired as I am of kind of doing this. And as much, I'd really like to hand things over and kind of complete this portion. So I'm just going to ask that we really try to suck it up for the next week and read it cover to cover and make sure that we're okay, because we all have to sign our names to it. But we do really need to read every bit. And come prepared at a meeting. If you don't speak up about some wording, we're going to assume that you're okay with whatever's there. That's probably the best way we can do it. So, with that, I think we can move to oral communications. And if we have a member of the public who wants to speak on something not related to our report, now would be the chance to do so. I see we've got one hand. It's Roland. So Sarah, are you doing my timing, or who's doing timing for me?
I can get it going. And Rippin, are you able to screen share a timer? Rippin,
I
are
can
you
do
there?
it.
Oh, he's got it.
Oh, there he is. Perfect.
Alrighty, now give me. Hold on. Okay. Okay, I see one raised hand, which is Mr. Roland Lebrun, and I will, Mr. Lebrun, you should be able to unmute yourself and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So very briefly, and I may be in trouble. I want to give you an update on the latest VTA sausage making since last addressed you. I did tell you that President Wasserman, President of the board, had decided to elect Supervisor Simijan to the VTA board. However, that did not happen, and I just found that out 2 hours ago, trying to figure out exactly what happened there. The thing I didn't know is that approximately 2 hours prior to that, there was a meeting at the board of supervisors called HULET, H-L-U-E-T, where Supervisor Simijan basically ripped the VTA apart, Jim Lawson, and essentially threatened him to split the VTA down with San Jose on one side and the other 14 cities having their own transportation and congestion management agency, and actually threatened to introduce legislation to do precisely that. So that may have something to do with the fact he was not appointed. Interesting developments on the Caltrain board. Somehow Glenn Hendricks ended up on the Caltrain board. He's the new chair of the VTA. He was elected by the departing board last year, not the board that they will be appointing tomorrow. So you're going to figure out what that is. I don't understand why I didn't appoint John McAllister. Last thing is Trans is in closed session. Something very strange happened last year. Out of the blue, essentially without agonizing, they announced Jim Hartnett was retiring, and that they had appointed Carter Mao as the interim GM CEO of Samtrans, Also that they had appointed Michel Bouchard as the interim Caltrain CEO. And I assure you that got attention, and the attorney just went to closed session and said, oh, by the way, we've got nothing to announce from the meeting we had last year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Roland.
That was the only speaker.
Okay. Well, I feel like I was just updated on a soap opera that I missed out on. So I'm going to have to go do some reading of articles. Okay, so let's see. Next is item number 4, which is basically the discussion of how it's going. So before we get into the meat of what we did, just wanted to check in with everybody on how it went. I know I worked with, just a report for myself and for Larry. I read the report, or I read everything except the 2 media sections of the report, being chapter 3, Meadow, Charleston, and Churchill. But I read sort of cover to cover and made a slew of edits, and Larry and I went back and forth on those. So the documents that were released today represent that. There's only like 2 things I think that Larry and I were sort of would like feedback on, I think. But otherwise they weren't really substantive. It was more just shortening things and, you know, making it easier to read. Still, it means that the onus is on everybody to actually read those and see those changes. I've asked Sarah to release the versions that have the kind of the key comments that we've made on the side. But if you want to see the blow by blow, every single edit that was made to the document, you can always ask Sarah for that version of the chapter. I just didn't want to give you guys 2 versions of every single chapter because I thought it would be too much. I also spent a bunch of time pulling together the appendix and trying to get, Ripon has been working on all the images and all the AECOM fact sheets and matrices and stuff, but I went through and kind of pulled what I thought were kind of key documents that ought to be in there in their entirety. So some things are things that, you know, have been released as part of XCAP. So Norm Mattioni's testimony or his handout that he gave, or Caltrain presentations. And then some of them are other things that we've talked about by reference. But so for example, the Caltrain rail corridor use policy in its entirety, I've stuck that into the appendix. So you should see on the appendix list today kind of a good summary of what's in there. It will be shortened somewhat. Right now, I also threw in all the documents we've had for every meeting of XCAP, but that's going to be shortened significantly to just having sort of, for each of the meetings, it'll have the agenda, the meeting summary, which includes public comment. And then if there was any like super significant document or submission, it would go in there. So that's kind of what I worked on to try to shorten all of that. I also added, I think, a few words to the glossary. So that's kind of a summary of the stuff that I looked at. I also edited the safety chapter a little bit. So Greg, especially, you might want to take a little look at that one as well. It's not very much, but there were a few edits in there. Larry, did you have anything to add?
No, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, Tony.
So Nadia, the little section on the alternate mitigations or the modified viaduct that you and I and several other people worked on in the appendix.
Yeah.
Where would that sit in the appendix? I didn't see it.
So I think I didn't put it in because I didn't have it yet to be able to stick it in there. So I think the way we talked about it last time is that in the Churchill section, there's going to be a mention of this alternative was brought forth but not considered by XCAP. You can see more of it in the appendix, and then your document would be put into the appendix itself in its entirety. So that's where that would go.
And yeah, I saw a section on that in the report, but it's not elaborated. We need to add some more language there.
Yeah, I think I didn't see what's in there, but be forewarned, I think we're not going to put very much because it wasn't considered by XCAP, right? So we just have to put a little blurb.
Right.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to read what was submitted. So there we are. Greg or Dave, you want to talk about how it went for you guys and where we are and what's cooking?
Oh, I guess I'll go first since you said Greg first. I don't know. So I did not spend my Christmas vacation working on section 3.2. But what we did do is at our last meeting, we discussed a number of specific changes, which was mainly removing sections from that chapter that were duplicative of other parts of the report. So the version that I sent to everybody, I think yesterday morning, contains those changes, and really those are the only changes in the section.
Okay.
There were there was a long section on the history of the underpass. I can actually go through all of them if you want to know exactly what changed. But basically a lot of the duplicative stuff was taken out. I saw that at the same time, Keith did a rewrite of a long section we have of engineering challenges for the trench, which at first glance looked pretty reasonable to me, because that does right now in the version of the report I just sent you, that particular section is quite long.
Okay.
So if Keith streamlined it a bit and kind of got to the important bits, I think that's probably a good change. But other than that, I don't feel like I can't think of more work that I think we need to do on that chapter.
Okay.
I feel like that chapter says what we need it to say. So now I'm curious to see if there's other feedback or other things that people feel we need to change.
And I did have a question. I didn't get a chance to read, Keith, what you sent, but just looking at the titles, we have this chapter that right now is called Lessons Learned and something. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Which is basically the amalgamation of all the recommendations, policymaker, then technical, and then lessons learned, which were the ones that we kind of had self-identified as a group. And I'm wondering if all of what Keith wrote goes in the trench section, or as part of it in the description of the trench alternatives, and then the part that's like questions for AECOM and whatever, does that go into future technical questions?
So when I rewrote it, I broke it into 3 sections, and just to make it cleaner, because we had a whole bunch of like miscellaneous stuff thrown together. And there really is the 3 things I wanted to have documented. First is documenting why is this not easy. And so I have one section where it's relatively short and without a lot of discussion, just these are the hard things about the trench. And the next is why don't we necessarily trust AECOM's analysis, or why, maybe I shouldn't say trust, that's a little hard word. Why do we question their analysis? And so that I have one section that's basically a summary of what I presented in that XCAP presentation that one day. And then finally, the last thing is things that if we were going forward, we should remember. And those aren't explicit questions for necessarily for AECOM or for Caltrain, but just things, for example, if you were really worried about the creek, how could you avoid the creek and maximize that slope between Charleston and the creek? Okay. And so there's some things that talk about that. And that was just basically a section, and most of that was already in the report that Greg had massaged into something that looked pretty good, and I kind of threw it back in his lap, and it's maybe not quite as massaged, but look it over and see if you like it better or not. So then in addition to that, we have explicit questions to Caltrain and explicit questions for, I forget exactly all the things that we're looking at. I didn't touch that section at all, that question section. This was just more the front part of it.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to jump in, but if there's going to be something in this that says that XCAP doesn't trust AECOM or something that alludes to that, I mean, I feel like that's something that really, that's pretty strong language. So I think that.
Okay, I think the phrase I used was questioning their analysis. And I was just summarizing what was already presented. So that's not new, but I thought that those thoughts that I presented, I think are still valid. And I think those should at least be addressed, say, and I didn't say the XCAP did, I said it was all me. I had questions about their analysis.
Okay, understood. That was
yeah. There is a part of Keith's doc that says member Rectal questioned, and we're going to have to.
Understood.
I mean, we're going to have to think about how to handle that. But no, that's a good point.
Yeah, and if we need to put in whatever was the response back, because I think AECOM and staff did have something back that we can also put that in there for completion, right?
Yeah, all I was going to ask for is if that was the thought of the XCAP, then the XCAP needs to somehow say that this is all of your thoughts. But sorry, that was my jumping to conclusions.
No, it's okay. It's but you know what, Philip, I'd encourage you to definitely read what Keith submitted, and then if you have some concern, you can certainly we can certainly look at adjusting that.
Yep, thanks, will do.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's one big general thing that I think we learned. I'm not sure if everyone shares this opinion, but I think the entire study was more automobile dominated rather than Palo Alto's comprehensive plan, which is more bike and ped. The slow moving traffic was less important than the faster moving traffic. And I'm not sure if we can say that in one sentence, or but we learned that it was it had a bias towards automobiles than pedestrians.
I think I want to say we have that in there, but hold on. Did you?
Yes,
did you?
It is in there somewhere, but it's not super clear.
Okay, so you're proposing to the lessons learned page, you want to add something that says that overall the work seemed to be more car centric than bike and ped centric?
Correct. Yes. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody have any objections to that?
Yeah, I do. I'm not concerned. I'm concerned. I don't really understand what it means, because it seems to me they talk about all of those problems, and how you decide whether they put too much emphasis on cars versus bikes and peds. Is there some quantitative measure, or this is just sort of a gut feel?
So Larry, yes, it is a gut feel, and yeah, thank you. It's not really clear, but let me give you one example. For instance, the report says that traffic is mitigated. The mitigations that from the closure of Churchill, traffic is mitigated. Now, it doesn't talk about the quality of those mitigations, that it needs a new intersection near Professorville. It does not talk about an on-ramp, more traffic going through a neighborhood. Now, from a car point of view, it's not a big problem. The car doesn't know it's moving, and it continues to move through, and traffic is cleared, but it goes through a neighborhood. So it's this kind of bias that says that the problem is mitigated, but it's mitigated for traffic, but not for bikes and peds. It's a shift that a generation of new planners have moved towards in recent years, in the last 20 years, I'd say, to moving towards bikes and peds more than cars, or at least balancing that out. And yes, so it is a gut feeling that we have emphasized cars more than pedestrians and bikes.
We do have a line in there, Tony. Are you looking at the lessons learned document, that number 10?
I don't have it here, Nadia, but I saw it.
Okay, it says traffic studies are too vehicle centric. We really don't know where bikes go. We focus on LOS and not the bike experience or impacts.
Correct. Yeah, that sentence needs to go into the lessons learned.
That is where it is.
Oh, it is. Okay, sorry. I didn't.
Yeah, it's already there. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay. Okay, so it sounds like when we read this, we should look at Keith's section as if it's 3.4. Well, actually, I think Greg did what we'd asked him to, which is we remove the numbers. So then the question is, where do we look at Keith relative to where this is supposed to go? Could someone help me with that?
Unmute, Greg.
I can put the numbers back in. I was using a Google Docs plugin. It always started at 1, and it was confusing because my stuff, that track was supposed to be 3.2. So like, short of writing my own Google Docs plugin, which was not my idea of a fun weekend project, we didn't.
I'm totally down for the low tech version of it's on. It goes on page 7. Can you just look at it and tell me more or less where it goes?
Hold on. Hold on a sec. Let me read the doc. I do have it here. So if I look at the Meadow, you want me to share the Meadow and Charleston options doc? Okay.
Yeah, that'll make it
And we'll
easier.
do this because I don't actually know the answer, so we'll have to just do it as I speak. Where has the button gone? It's not there. Share
Unless
screen.
Keith remembers.
The big green one at the bottom. That's the one that I want. Okay. Okay. So so basically, what the doc has. Let's see. We describe the options. I'm going to scroll fast for a minute. We go through the city council alternatives. And by the way, there was a section in the middle, the city council adopted criteria where Nadia, you had inserted a section about traffic, which I actually moved to a later section.
Okay.
Because this additional considerations is more from the city council. Then we had pros and cons, viaduct advantages, disadvantages, hybrid advantages, disadvantages, trench advantages, disadvantages, underpass advantages, disadvantages. And then finally, under priority areas for future study, there were some generic things. And here's where we're in a little bit of a mess, right? Because we have these things here like box jacking and geotechnical analysis. And I don't know if these have to do, because here I then put, here are specific study areas for the viaduct and things that Tony and I wanted to see a long time ago. Then there are specific study areas from the hybrid, which from the original hybrid doc. Then the trench. And here's where I think, this is where I think Keith's stuff would go in this section labeled trench specific study areas, which is on page, I don't know. I really do like Google Docs, but sometimes it can drive me crazy. Okay, on page, whatever page this is, under trench specific study areas. And here we have specific things. We also have questions for Caltrain, Adobe Creek, Barron Creek, groundwater, bridge design. So this whole section, I think, could be replaced in whole or in part with Keith's new doc. That's where I think it would go.
Keith, is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, so the section that he had that said study areas, trench study areas.
Trench specific study
Yep.
areas. Okay.
What I wrote, I think would go into that,
Okay.
would replace that section. There's no content in that current section that's not in my rewrite. So we could just plug that whole thing in.
I don't want to share it with the same people yet. Okay, hold on.
So
Give me a
basically
second.
it would take over from page 19 to page 22 is by my count.
So trench specific study areas.
And it would just be these first 6 bullets, like questions for Caltrain. I didn't touch that at all.
Okay. I will put
So
this
what I'll
in.
do, I think, oh, you're going to put it in now? Okay.
No, I'm going to comment. Okay. I'm going to replace this section here with the new doc, which unfortunately makes it longer. So then the question is under here, Adobe Creek analysis, Barron Creek analysis, groundwater analysis, bridge design, tiebacks, cost and duration. How much of this do we want? Or should I just share the stock with Keith and we'll do another round and let him
I
make
think
the
you guys are
changes?
going to need to do another round to make it easier
Okay.
for the rest of us. We're going to be doing a bunch of reading anyway.
Okay.
And that'll be
Yeah, I think that's the
easier.
correct way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so-
I don't think it'll take you long.
Yeah.
So I will share it with you as
And the
soon
rest
as
of us,
you're-
we can start reading. You can sort of avoid the trench area for now if you wanted, and then just kind of keep reading because we all got to read.
Okay.
And Greg, what, excuse me, Greg, when do you expect you can have this ready?
I unfortunately need Keith to do the work. So
Okay, Keith?
So from a standpoint of Brown Act, can I edit it and then send it out, post it? I guess
as
I'd have to
long as
post it.
no one but you or I and one other person edits it, you can edit it and then I can send out a new Word document when you're ready.
Because there
Yeah,
really is
and
no new content. All the content that would be in this new thing has already
can-
been posted
guys-
today.
If you merge it together, you can give it to Sarah, and Sarah can pass it out to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what will be easiest for me, Keith, is if you make the changes in everything from trench specific study areas to underpass specific study areas, replace whatever parts need to be replaced. Just drop me an email or a text when you do it.
At this
And
point,
then I can send the new thing to Sarah.
like you said, it's all been made public. Everyone can see. There's no
Yes.
new information,
Yes.
so
Yes.
that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, one of the problems is that this trench is complicated. And
Yeah.
so if we were going forward with this, you have a lot of questions outstanding. if we're talking about the hybrid or the viaduct, it's a simpler design, and so there's not nearly as many open questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's fine. I think this is the right place in this chapter for this discussion.
And just to chime in, I think there's been a lot of people who've been in support of this trench idea for a long time. And I think the more detail that we put in here, the better it is, and fewer questions we'll get.
Great.
So this is the right place. So Keith, just let me know if you have a chance to do this.
Okay.
And
So,
then hopefully it won't
Greg,
take long.
Your version seems to have more comments than the one that we have.
So what I did is I exported this to a Word doc and I mailed Sarah the Word doc.
Okay.
I may get rid of most of these comments at this point because at this point they're just historical comments.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just noting that like my copy doesn't have all the things that you have.
Okay. So the other big change that was made here is if I scroll down, the rest of this, in additional considerations, I moved the traffic study section that Nadia had inserted earlier. I then kept the noise section the same. I shortened the section about from Joe Teresi to basically say,
Perfect. Great.
these are the list of agencies. And by the way, I need someone to tell me who Joe Teresi is.
Okay. I'll make a note.
And then if you're one of my buddies for this doc, I'll tag you for it. And then there were some other sections in here, the history of the underpass I deleted. So those were the changes that I made over the break.
Okay.
Now I noticed we talked Matadero and Adobe, but not Barron Creek.
Oh, this was actually, it's not this is what Teresi sent us stuff on.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Then we have what we have.
Yeah, exactly. It's just retelling what happened. Okay. Anything else?
I feel like this section is in as good shape as it's going to get pending a merge and an edit of everything else.
Yeah, we're getting there. Okay, that leaves a good segue for Dave, because I think Dave has been paying more attention to how does the Churchill section feel compared to the way the Meadow Charleston section is. So Dave, I'll let you take over that part and let us know. Because you did the table of contents too, which is super helpful.
Let's see. Let me might be helpful as I pull up to pull up the Churchill doc. Let me just get that real quick. So over break, didn't do much. There were a number of edits that Phil was nice enough to make. They were pretty minor, relatively speaking, so I just accepted them all. Corrections here and there, some grammar stuff. Then I submitted the document, which I left a bunch of comments in there. So let me see if I can find it so we can talk. So some of those were like unresolved to me. Like Nadia, I think you had left a few comments about staff needing to find out about this and that, which I thought I heard Ripon talk about a little bit. So maybe those can get inserted in now. Yeah.
Yeah. By the end of the week, I think he should be getting that back from AECOM. So, you know, what I explained to Ripon is that you basically copy pasted from the matrix. So once we have that updated language, we should just be able to copy paste in there.
Okay, good. And I think, so we can go through and you can tell me maybe which ones are going to wait for, or where they're going to come from. And then I think the last thing, which was kind of open, was Carrie had sent a bunch of comments and I had made some edits based on those. And I did not hear back from Carrie whether or not those were acceptable or not. So maybe we can take a look at those. I can only remember 2 of them. So maybe Carrie can help with one or two that I'm blanking on right now, or I could pull up the original email if we need to.
Sorry, Dave, I was offline the whole break. So why don't we plan to talk on the phone tomorrow or whenever is appropriate for your schedule?
Oh,
we can
okay.
Figure it out.
Okay. We can do that then. That's fine.
Great. And I want to acknowledge that Keith and I were both working, but on separate sections. And so we still owe you the minority opinion that needs to be edited. So I will definitely have that by next week. So Keith, you and I need to make sure we get that done this week.
Nadia, do you need any more input from me on that minority opinion?
Yes, it'll be you, me, it'll be the 3 of us. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So we'll try to set something up. or do what we can over Google Docs, whatever's easier. Okay.
So can I pull up the comments real quick and then just
Yeah, go for it.
go through them real quick? All right, so let me share.
And then I just want to make sure we address whatever structural questions that you had, Dave.
Yeah, let's do the TOC in a second, if that's what you mean.
Yep.
I think is it this? Yeah, that's it. Okay. So I think the first one is about this statement significantly. And I think Larry had made that change many versions ago.
Mhm.
So I don't know if anybody has suggestions on what we should put in there.
This one, Ripon, if you're here, you and I had discussed this one. So this one, we went back and we have like a roll-up costs of like how much is the shoe fly tack relative to the cost of the entire project. And I don't remember what the percentage was, but it seemed lower. I mean, would you consider it significant or not from your experience, Ripon? How's that?
I mean, I think there was a per lineal foot cost that we provided based on the cost estimates, which were kind of not very significant compared to the overall total cost of the project.
Yeah, so I think given whatever the numbers were, and I apologize, I don't have them in front of me, nor do I remember what the number was, but like relative to the cost, the linear feet, it just wasn't enough. Is it maybe a document that we had at the last meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Why don't we put the percentage in?
Why don't we just take this sentence out? There's no need, that sentence doesn't even need to be in there.
Yep.
We have a section on cost. We say how much we think it's that AECom thinks it's going to cost.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Great.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Resolved. Next.
So I'm just gonna creating a new doc here. Let's see where to go. Sorry. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to delete this.
Yep.
Oh, whoops, I shouldn't do that. Let me just. Okay, and then I can get rid of those. All right, so then the next one is here. Viaduct alternative increased maintenance costs. And you had a comment on that.
Ripon this is coming from, this is going to come from AECom, but the overall description was that, Ripon, do you want to take this one? This was about the increased maintenance costs of the viaduct.
So in general, the maintenance cost represents the total cost that the project will entail. So at this time, the matrix wasn't distinguishing who is going to bear that cost, but that in general, what those costs are going to be for the project. So the different alternatives were showing what the long-term maintenance costs are going to be. And therefore, we were thinking we could leave it as it, because only Viaduct is the one where the cost will be significantly shared with the Caltrans, but all others would have, it will stay as is. So there's not going to be a big difference in stating different things in those, especially at this time when we don't have that arrangement. And in Viaduct, maybe when we go into the agreements, if we are looking at the usage of the space underneath, that could be a tool for negotiations with the Caltrans as well. So at this time, we felt that it was not appropriate to kind of distinguish who is going to bear that cost when we don't have those negotiated agreements. But in general,
increased from what? It says the viaduct's alternative has increased maintenance costs. Increased from.
So from no project. So if there was no project, is there going to be an increase or decrease? Or if there is a closure, is there going to be an increase or decrease? So they are relatively looking at between the different alternatives. So remember on the matrix, there were like 2 dots or 1 dot or 3 dots, depending upon the relativity of the increased cost in maintenance for each alternative. So they were comparing among different alternatives on the long-term maintenance cost.
So we may want to refer what the increase is.
I want to say back up what Tony is saying here, because it's not clear whether those are due to the fact that the tracks are elevated or whether the structure itself requires maintenance. And if the structure requires maintenance, how is that not also true of the hybrid, for example?
Correct, but in hybrid situation, there would be pump stations also. So there's going to be pump stations that are going to be maintained by the city, or for the depression, like if they are below ground. So there will be some maintenance. So different the different components of the long-term maintenance.
I understand that, but I mean, so the pumps would be additive to any cost increases due to, let's say, structure, but that doesn't come clear from here. It sounds like. By the way, it's not that I'm advocating for the viaduct, but it sounds like the viaduct has some unique characteristics that increase maintenance, and that we don't know what those are.
Correct. So since we just know that there will be some cost increase.
But we don't actually. I mean, is it painting the viaduct every 10 years? Like you'd paint any bridge every 10 years?
I mean, structure maintenance in itself may have associated costs. It could be graffiti. It could be anything else. There would be required to maintain the structures in place. Long term.
Yeah. So Vipin, it's just a question of clarity here.
Yeah, because I think to Phil's point, yes, but the partial underpass would have maintenance costs because there are concrete walls that need to be repointed and cleaned of graffiti, and the tunnel would have maintenance costs because someone's got to clean the garbage out of the tunnel.
So it's a structural maintenance cost.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the hybrid, we clearly identify pumping costs.
Pump station and structures, right?
Yeah, so sure. No, but I'm saying is that we say for the hybrid, there's a pump station cost.
And structure maintenance, right? So you would have some kind of maintenance on the structure on the long term.
I don't know that the matrix has that. Does it have that written?
I believe it says something about, let me pull out that.
So I think these maintenance costs for all alternatives should be evaluated.
Well, I think the thing is that, remember, the matrix was being used to discern between one and the other. So if one alternative, like for instance, a closure, doesn't have long-term maintenance the way a structure would, like a viaduct, then the matrix attempted to say, well, a closure wouldn't necessarily have any long-term maintenance, but a viaduct would. I think the challenge that's the thing that's difficult is that it seems like a partial underpass probably also would have some sort of maintenance associated with it. And the thing is, the word increase, and this is what's on my comment on the side, anything greater than 0 is considered an increased. But what Ripon explained to me and just explained now is that the challenge is also the way AECOM thinks of the costs is they say a project in general would have some long-term costs, and they don't know whether those long-term costs are things that the city of Palo Alto would bear, that Caltrain would bear. And so they're just delineating that there's something more. But not having the matrix in front of me, I'd be interested to understand whether the partial underpass also has some sort of maintenance for structure.
I'm just looking at I can share my screen to bring up the.
That'd be good, yeah.
1 second.
I think we want to be fair, but we also be careful. Is this a discriminator?
Right.
And if it isn't, are we wasting our time by polishing this thing that kind of is irrelevant to begin with?
And it's that's the thing is they also, Ripon said that AECOM couldn't quantify what the costs were. So like, it'd be some cost, but we don't know how much more, right?
So it does say is above ground railroad alignment with embankments and viaduct structure, increased maintenance costs due to.
That's for the viaduct, but see
for the underpass, it says above ground structures for both rail and road and rail, and pump stations for underpass dewatering. So they do add some additional. So that's why there are like 2 dots versus 1 dot.
Okay, so it seems to me, Dave, if we can go back to your screen sharing. This is a section that's written where we're sort of comparing all of the alternatives, right? Under the city council criteria, so long-term maintenance. So we have options requiring pump stations will have increased costs. And then it seems like both the hybrid and the viaduct would have an increased cost related to the fact that there's a structure, I think is a better way to have that sentence work. Does that make sense?
Okay, so what would you like me to write again?
So we could cut and paste off the matrix. If you saw, has that one extra bullet under the partial underpass that says that it has a structure. So basically, the viaduct, you could change the sentence that exists and say the partial underpass and viaduct alternative would have an increased maintenance cost due to above ground or due to structures, right? Period. And I think that basically says, you know, there's some cost because there's a structure more than whatever the closure is.
You know, I think that all of the alternatives.
Clear if you said.
Sorry. All of the alternatives have some maintenance costs, some marginally more than or less. All of them except for the on-grade line.
Right, and that's what I think we just wrote, hopefully, with these two sentences, right? We would take out the sentences highlighted in yellow and have the second sentence.
When you say on grade, what does that mean? I mean, again,
That means
At grade.
Don't we mean to
At
say,
grade.
why the wording? We say the partial underpass and viaduct have maintenance costs, whereas the closure does not.
Okay, you could
even
add
for the closure, there may be cost because of maintenance of the tunnels, pedestrians, and other tunnels, right?
okay. Why don't we,
Let me try to. Partial underpass and viaduct would have maintenance costs due to structures, whereas the closure would not.
although what he just said is that the closure would have it for the bike ped tunnel. So basically, all of them would have structure costs.
I think they're all about the same. You know, I think we may need to, if we want finer grain, I think we need to do a study of maintenance costs.
Well, but what Rippon's saying though is that the matrix has those dots that indicates where the costs would be higher. So I think what we're saying is all three of them would have, well, some of them are going to have pumping costs, and then actually two would have pumping costs, right? The closure, because you have a bike ped underpass that probably you'd have to pump out the tunnel, and then the partial underpass. But then the viaduct would, all three of them then would have structures that have to have some maintenance, because even the closure has a bike ped tunnel, right?
So could we say like partial underpass and closures would have relatively higher cost of maintenance because of the underground pumping that will be required in addition to the structures required for all scenarios?
You know what I think we can do, Rippon? Why don't you and I take this part offline, and based on what we hear back from AECOM, we'll try to write this in a way that reflects both what AECOM is trying to say, but also what we're trying to communicate to the public. So we're not trying to, does that make more sense? I think that's probably better.
Nadia, I'd like to go back to the shoe fly tracks. I think I gave up too easily on that one.
Okay. You're in a fighting mood?
Because it doesn't follow. If you can scroll back up to them, or whoever's. Okay, now, two things. The previous paragraph refers to a shoe fly. So why does anybody care about that? So many times in our discussions, it seems to me that we talked about at the various places, whether it was Meadow, Charleston, or Churchill, that a shoe fly was a problem, that it ran up the costs and the time of construction. And I don't want to get into a debate about what's significant, because that's in the eyes of the beholder to some degree. But I think that if we're going to have, we're going to point out that the partial underpass has a shortcoming, and that is of needing a shoe fly. And we've all, to repeat, we've said several different places in our report that shoe flies are a problem. Then we ought to quantify it and say, if it's approximately a 10% increase or a 5% increase in time and money, then we ought to say that.
I think I'm fine keeping the, rather than get into doing, because then we have to go back and do math on the percentage of the project based on linear feet, and you can have an argument about how many linear feet. I'm comfortable if you want to keep that sentence in, I would just take out significantly. So it increases the time and the duration of construction and the cost. But
I'm okay with that.
I think that says what you want it to say, but doesn't, you know, because significantly, like you said, is kind of in the eye of the beholder, and then to knock it into percentages. I think it,
All right,
I'm
all right,
fine leaving it.
let's do that then.
I
Okay.
have a more annoying comment about this section, which is that my interpretation of this council thing was about continued rail operations after we're done, and not about impact on Caltrain during the construction.
Okay.
But that might just be, that's how I interpreted it in the other doc. I had to write about the section. I said, you know, there's not really a big difference.
Well, I think Dave took these right off the matrix. So the question would
Okay.
be, what does the
So
matrix
then, yeah,
say?
so then maybe I got it wrong, and I should go back and look and see what I said.
Yeah, that's a good
Okay.
notation. Okay.
I will take a look. Zoom has taken over my screen, so it's harder for me to see. But.
Yeah, it makes it, it's blinding. Okay. Dave, you want to keep going?
Yep. Okay. I guess this is one of your comments, Nadia. They missed some construction impacts.
Yeah, so that when we get the thing from, hold on, let me read what I wrote. For closure for mitigations options. I don't have my matrix in front of me to see what is missing. I think in an effort to make it short, they didn't put everything in there. And so, Dave, since you just kind of copy pasted, you have a shortened list. So I will, Ripon, you and I should look at that section as well. This is, what page is this in your thing, Dave? So I can.
In draft E, I think it would be page 10.
Okay, page 10, and this is closure plus mitigations. Does someone else have easy access to the matrix? Because we could look at it.
Let me see.
Ripon, can you share your screen again, and can we look at the matrix?
I'll do that right now.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Oops.
And Dave, what that was under?
Local street circulation impacts during construction.
Okay.
This is
So
for-
P.
right.
Yep. So see, it doesn't, it says that the only mitigations that you would have, it's that first box there, Ripon.
Yeah.
It says path along Palo Alto High School would be temporarily impacted during construction, and temporary night and weekend closures of Churchill, Alma, and Embarcadero. But my question was, doesn't it also impact Oregon Expressway, Kingsley and High Street? Embarcadero Bridge needs to be widened. I'm not sure that that box accounts for that.
Yeah, this is primarily for the closure. Yeah, but yeah, would probably with the mitigations, it might have to add those additional.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously they can't do things to Oregon Expressway without temporarily doing something to it. So
Yeah.
is that something you were already verifying with AECom, and that's what's coming?
I was not, but I can add to the list. So they would have to go back and amend that one.
Yeah.
So we would add those additional mitigations into that.
Yeah, basically this section is about local street circulation impacted during construction. And given that the mitigations touch a bunch of different intersections, the question is, how would it touch those intersections and how is that listed? And right now it only shows,
Well, Keith Nadia, Keith introduced are those differentiators?
I'm not sure, but what I'm confused by is that the alternative that specifically has street mitigations as a way to mitigate impacts somehow doesn't have all the mitigations listed. And so it's just a question, do we have that, is that box correct? And, you know, if relative to the other ones, it's still small, see how it has just 1 dot compared to the 2 dots and 3 dots? It may not matter, but I just want to be sure that they thought about the fact that they still have to widen the bridge at Embarcadero. And what does that do to closing down Embarcadero at all? And about Oregon Expressway. And keep in mind, this is just impacts during construction, but is that, you know, have those been considered? And if the answer is yes, and they still want to just stick with this, okay, fine, then it's not a big deal. But if it's no, and oh, that needs to be corrected, then I just want to know. That makes sense?
So you and Ripon will figure that out?
Yeah, we'll ask AECOM just what their thoughts were on that.
Okay.
It may be that because it's possible that the other mitigations are minor, and so that really doesn't have much of a road closure, and so in the scheme of things, it's just not a big deal, to Larry's point. And if that's the case and that's what they want to say back, then fine, then we don't have to.
I would agree with that, because in general, the intersection improvements are less disruptive than the whole, you know, like scenarios, because you would continue to operate the intersection. And they are more short-term projects rather than long-term, but we can certainly confirm.
Okay, great.
Okay, going back now. All right, next one is this one.
That's the one that we're getting an answer on now. If you show more, this is the question of, is it only temporary encroachment or is it long-term, yada, yada.
Okay. Let's see, are there anywhere else down here? Maybe, oh. Okay, we talked about that. You owe this section, and we're gonna do something with this viaduct thing, I think, to the appendix.
Oh, that's actually, let's go back to that for just a second. Tony, that's your blurb.
Right, yeah, I saw that. I think we need to revise that language a little bit.
Okay, so you'll work on that?
I will, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And we are towards the end here. Okay, and I think that's it.
Cool.
I'll move to the
Structure.
table of contents real quick. Well, having only sewed this together this morning, I haven't had a chance to really think about it too much. But if you look through it, there's a lot of stuff here. Oh, actually, one quick thing. In your documents, would you please not use the title selection for the formatting and use H1 as that top one, and then everything subsequent under that? Because I had to go and actually change that to make the table of contents look right.
I think on mine, everything was H2. So I
might have had H1s.
You want H1 for the title and H2 for everything else?
Well, usually there is a header for the section, and that I found in a couple submitted documents, it was still title.
Right.
And so please change that to H1 so that it'll actually sit in the table of contents correctly. Sorry, I didn't write down exactly which ones those were.
Okay.
So let's see if I could find the TOC again. I was wondering what happened to, there are some sections, there are some chapters we talked about previously that I don't see. I don't.
Are you talking about in the Metal Charleston there section?
No, just the overall TOC.
I got rail safety down at the bottom. I got
What happened to the why are we doing grade separation section and the Caltrain section and all that kind of stuff? Is that all in there?
That is, there's introduction. So starts on page.
There's introduction, okay.
Yeah. And then influencing factors, which used to be, yeah.
Okay.
And then comes ideas discarded. So question for the group. My feeling was, so do we, in reading the thing cover to cover, by the time you've gotten to like, you're a policymaker, so you just read the cover note for the policymaker, then you read what is XCAP, what is a grade separation, then you read influencing factors. And then we get into, here are ideas that we discussed and tossed out. I'm wondering if we want to go right into the meat of stuff and then stick in the, here are the things that we discussed and tossed out after we've got into the meat of what we're doing. I could see arguments on both sides. I mean, it discusses why we threw out the tunnel. And so if people need to hear that first, they could. But I feel like by the time you've read 50 pages in, you kind of want to start reading about Churchill and Meadow. And
Yeah.
we could take that section and put it at the end.
Yeah. Well, Nadia, so can I comment on that? Because
Yeah.
I'm concerned that somebody who, let's say, is not even on the council now, but 4 years or even 6 years now picks up the document, may have vague recollections at best of the work we've done. And they may remember that those ideas for a tunnel. So maybe the answer to the quandary you're posing is just to have a very, very brief section called Ideas We Tossed Out and put the meat of that discussion in the appendix for anybody who actually cares to read it.
Well, that's kind of what we have. You see on the screen, we have ideas discarded by XCAP. So it's basically 2 pages, not even.
Okay, well, that's all it needs to be, really.
Right. But the question is, from an order perspective, I think this should go after the Meadow Charleston sections.
Well, actually, I would disagree. Yeah. All right.
Well, read it cover to cover and then come back and tell me next week, because
right,
I'm
okay.
totally open to either. It was just one of those, does this go here or does it not? But frankly, it's very short and you could skip through it fast. So I'm happy to hear.
Maybe it could go, maybe I should soften my feelings and just say, as long as you mention it someplace in the body of the report.
Oh yeah, it's not going to get removed. It's just a matter of if it is at the spot.
I think I ought to go up front, Nadia, just because it has such superficial popularity.
Okay, sounds good. I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah,
okay.
It certainly has a grip. Certainly there's a contingent among the citizens that really wants the tunnel.
Right. All right.
Why? Sorry. Should we say why we discarded these ideas? Or
we did. It's in there. I mean, this is just the table.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's in there.
Too much time on it, but it's only a couple of sentences as to why council decided to eliminate it.
It's just cost. Yeah.
It says it right there.
Yeah.
Go back a little bit.
Just 2 paragraphs.
Yep. Okay, and then Dave, so you said that there was still some sort of structural differences that you wanted some clarification on, or you wanted us to discuss. So what did you spot?
Like I said, I put this together early this morning, and then didn't have much time to actually look at any of that.
Okay.
So hopefully, I'm sorry about that, and
it's fine.
Talk about it next time.
Totally
But
understand.
actually, it feels pretty good right now, given what I see here.
Yep.
But I haven't looked at it further beyond that. But maybe Phil and I can do that between now and next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay. And if anyone has any suggestions on shortening that rail corridor timeline thing so it doesn't look so awful in the appendix, feel free to take a crack at it. That's not my skill set. Okay. And you can see on the appendix part, if you guys want to take a quick peek at the appendix. So I broke up the appendix into Appendix A, Appendix B. So Appendix A is basically everything that was produced by AECOM for us. It's the fact sheets, it's the matrix, it's all the renderings. We will have a link, like a page that basically says, and here's the links to all the animations, even though obviously, because we can't obviously include an animation in the report itself. And Ripon and I had a discussion where the city is looking to long-term archive the Connecting Palo Alto website. So like for the next 10 or 15 years, hopefully we can secure that website and just keep it up. So things won't get lost. So that's a big deal. And then for some reason, Appendix B as a title didn't come. I must not have highlighted it correctly because you can't see it on the appendix.
I missed that.
Yeah, no, I think it's because I must have labeled it wrong. But it starts, I think, just before the word traffic report. I think it's where it starts. And so basically, everything that's the traffic report, the noise and vibration report, and other key documents, which this will all be cleaned up. In my appendix, you'll see each of them as a link and it takes you to where the PDF is. This is all basically for the editor that's going to help me to be able to pull together all those PDFs. So really, this is just a listing of documents right now that she will help us pull together. Her name is Sue Ann, by the way. And then Appendix C is the one that I'm working on. That'll be all the XCAP meeting materials that I told you I'm trying to make one PDF for each of the meetings that we've had. That'll have just the key documents. And then Appendix D will be, Sarah is going to help me with the PDF of all the public comments that we've received as one giant, submission in there. So we can immortalize all those comments and things that have been sent into XCAP. So obviously the appendix is enormous, but since this isn't actually getting printed, it's fodder for future,
So Nadia, I have a general question.
Yeah.
We got a lot of public comments along the lines of, you should restate the report or rewrite the report or clarify the report. Is anybody going to go through all those emails and modify the report accordingly? Are we all responsible for doing that?
I will try to take another look at them. If there's any in particular that stood out to you, I think some of the more recent ones that we got might be useful. I didn't get to look at today's packet of any comments that we got, although I don't remember if we got any.
Yeah, I think the comment flow is really reduced actually.
Yeah. But if somebody wants to take a peek, that would be great. I mean, otherwise I've tried to read them along the way and kind of think through. I do recall there was one, you know what, I'll make a note. There was one person who had some pretty specific comments about chapter 3 somehow. And I'll see if we can dig that out and look at that.
Yeah, a lot of them are very partisan, of course.
Right.
In effect saying, rewrite the report to agree with my point of view.
Right. Okay.
Just asking.
I'll try to take a look at what I can, but everyone should do it on their own. I mean, that would help. Anything, you know what, I realized we drifted from item number 4 on our agenda to item number 5. We got into the meat of the report and I did not take any public comment. So at this time, I want to make sure that if there's any member of the public who wanted to speak on something, that we let that happen before we keep going. I apologize. We're just anxious to get this done. So if any member of the public wanted to comment on either items 4 or items 5 at this point, we're happy to take any comments. I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to take that as that we can keep going with basically section 5, item 5, which is what we've been doing. Okay. Anything else? Is there anything else that you guys want to discuss substantively? Otherwise, I'm fine breaking, and then everyone's homework is going to be to read all of the attachments that have been put in there, expecting that Greg and Keith are going to send us an updated one with the new edits in there.
And otherwise, so Nadia, from a point of view of editing, we're talking about editing a Google Doc.
So what we're talking about is everybody read through what you have, and if you have something substantive, come to the next meeting prepared.
Okay.
We're not gonna edit any unless you have a document that you're working on, like Keith and Greg. There's no other, or if you're waiting for some comments like Dave is, right? We aren't really going to futz with Google Docs. You just need to come prepared to the next meeting to discuss anything substantive.
Right.
But otherwise, going forward, we're going to assume that you've read anything. And if you didn't say anything at the last meeting or at the next meeting, then you agree with everything that's in there and everything's perfect. So the onus is on each of us to agree with every sentence that's in there.
And we will use that complete doc as the baseline for our reading, as opposed to all the other documents.
Well, we're going to use all the things that have been submitted today, with the exception of Greg's chapter 3, that's going to get amalgamated with what Keith put in, and we'll get another version of that. But otherwise, everything you have on today's agenda is the report as it stands right now.
All right.
And we have to go through and edit.
Okay.
Yeah, Tony. And then
Nadia,
Keith, I
this
mean, then
just-
Dave.
I thought that you were that the people dissenting on Churchill were going to put in a new section.
Yes, sorry. So Keith and I owe you that section. So we will have that for you guys next week. So that might be the one straggler.
So Nadia, don't forget to include me on that discussion.
And Phil, yes, I'm sorry. I'm saying Keith because I know it was Keith who was busiest and we couldn't get in touch over the weekend, but
Yeah, just contact me and
yes,
we'll
no, I
do
will.
something else.
So I had a question because a friend of mine who works on financing these big, large public projects, the question about if we choose the least expensive alternative now, does it give us negotiating room to get a better alternative with public money? And it's just a question that we probably need to think about, but I don't have any answers.
I would say that that is something you can raise with city council, but it's outside of XCAP's purview at this point.
I agree, thanks.
Yeah. I do hope Larry and I are going to have a meeting with staff in the next few weeks because we're supposed to, now that we have our new mayor is Tom Du Bois, then the mayor will get together with the city manager and city staff to figure out how XCAP will eventually present the report to council. So once I know what the answers are on that, I'll come back to you and let you know what that's going to look like. But basically the mayor and the city manager and the staff will kind of decide what's the best format for that. So stay tuned for that update. Dave, I saw your hand.
That dovetails nicely into my comment, which is I was wondering, things feel like they're getting close to me. And I was wondering if it might be useful to light a fire under our collective butts to put a schedule down and try to hit it and get everything done. And it would help our mindsets to force us to say, okay, end of January, that Wednesday, you got to read everything or else you agree.
Yeah, well, so by next meeting, I mean, consider your butts on fire right now, as if the country isn't already on fire. By next meeting, really, you have to come with all the substantive edits. You will still be missing the chapter from the minority opinion, which I will give to you. But really, our January 20th meeting is kind of our drop dead meeting. So you have next week, and I really hope that we can go through any substantive comments, and there may be a lot, so that might go over 2 meetings. If there isn't, your one final last cut is really the January 20th meeting. And we can decide as a group, you know, I'm sensitive to the fact that it is inauguration day. If you guys think that, I don't know what time the inauguration is that day. Does anyone know? Maybe if it's earlier in the morning, it may not interfere.
Noon.
Yes,
It's noon Eastern time.
It's noon Eastern time. Oh, okay. So
It's
then
9
it, okay, so it shouldn't impact our afternoon schedule. Okay, great.
You never know if there's a protest.
Let's not.
I mean, unless one of you is invited to a party, in which case it's going to be on Zoom anyway, so you
Yeah.
might as well.
Right. No, okay. Well, then I think we can easily have our last meeting on January 20th. And then my hope is that by then we have all finalized this report and I am turning it over to Sue-Ann, who will then work her magic. Just so everyone's clear, we are scheduled to be on city council. Ripon, remind me, I think it's February 18th is our city council date currently. I think that's what we had scheduled. I don't know if Rippon's still on.
Yes,
Yeah. So, so if we hand everything over to the editors by January 20th and it takes her 2 weeks and then we get a chance to look at it again, you know, we might have to call a meeting at some point in February to review it and see if there's anything, but really that's just going to be like, did the editor miss a space or, you know, whatever, or was there any questions that came up that we need to resolve? But I'm hoping that maybe by then that'll be, we may have some meeting at some point in early February, but hopefully that's it. So does that help set what to expect? We're almost there, guys. We're almost there.
Let's do it.
And yeah, I'm sure like I think we've all sort of reached the end of this and this has been a long process.
Here, the meeting was on February 22nd, and so we will have to adjust our schedules accordingly, but we'll look at January 20th and we can adjust it accordingly.
I'm sorry, say that one more time, Ripon. I caught you.
The city council meeting that we were planning to go to was February 22nd.
Okay.
For which the staff report would be due probably earlier in the February. And looking at your schedule does not look like it's going to be
It's
feasible.
going to line up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So-
Because the challenge is we have to get it in and then staff would write a report. Okay. So we can adjust accordingly once we know. And obviously we have to get with the city manager and the mayor anyway. So, all right. So, and just to recap, obviously we are turning everything into the editor, hopefully totally completed. So unless she has any questions or we missed something, we're not going to re-edit after we get that copy. So, all right. Anybody else? All right. Thanks, everybody. Expect to see, hopefully Greg and Keith, if you can get something out faster, that'll give us a jump on the reading. And we will, Phil and Keith and I will definitely have our missing section for you guys by next week. Oh, and you know what? One section I also owe is for the appendix. And I don't think anybody cares, but it is the last version of the underpass section that's going to go into the appendix, which I think is not, it's really a clip of whatever was in there before. That's going to sit on its own, but I will put that in there.
Oh, sorry. Is our next meeting next Wednesday, the 13th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Thanks.
and what we'll try to do is if for some reason anyone is done earlier and we can release documents sooner so you guys can read, that's better. But you've already got stuff to read now. I mean, there's plenty in there, so you feel free to start. And I highly recommend starting from the very beginning so you can feel the flow of the report as it goes. Also, do not read too many chapters at the same time. You become very prone to having train dreams, and I speak from experience. So take breaks. Be kind to yourselves.
And Nadia, I will send you the little paragraph that needs to get inserted.
Great. Okay, you can send it to me, copy Dave, because it actually goes in that Churchill section.
We'll do it by email.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Great. All right, guys. With that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye.
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 Good night.
Back to television.